How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of the Stupid Questions podcast. Today in the pod, we're going to be talking with Michael Delst. He is the founder and CEO of SuperTri. If you haven't heard of them, you're probably living under a rock, so go check it out. Really awesome short course format of racing where you will find a lot of the short course athletes from around the world, from Olympians to just really amazing all-around athletes. So go check them out. Really awesome conversation today with Michael, getting to talk about the founding story, obviously, but a lot of the background also of Michael from growing up with two parents that are lawyers and a number of other things that shaped and shifted the way that he was to find himself where he is today. Really awesome man, family man, has 3 kids, beautiful wife, and all of those things. So I hope you really enjoy this conversation with Michael Delst.
Late afternoon here, so based out of London. So it's it's been a good day, busy day, rushing different things.
Yeah. What was the biggest things on your plate today?
Well, we're doing a lot of interviews with kind of like Bloomberg, Financial Times, etc. about some of the fundraising that we are doing. So that caught a kind of my morning, and then in the afternoon we have every kind of first Thursday of the month we do our internal kind of KPI review of everything, where we are at with the different events and etc. So yeah, big day.
Yeah, it's awesome. I'm just curious before we kind of get off and rolling with the KPI stuff. What is for you, like the number 1 or number 2 KPI that you typically look at to figure like, okay, we're on the track that we should be?
Well, there's different things, right? We're looking at we're looking at a performance of our digital channels, right? That's one component. Let's say we're looking at a CRM and database is another big component. Then ultimately it's about sponsorship and sponsorship pipelines, etc. Right? So and then the other big one is participation, right? And how we're trending with participation on the different events. And then there's the last part is just kind of measuring in terms of PR, how much kind of share of voice and how we are performing in the different markets, how much breakthrough we get. Yeah, that's kind of
Nice.
the core elements of what we track.
Yeah, neat. Thanks for sharing that. Cool, man. So here's what I would love to do. First thing is I'm going to ask some questions to kind of get to know a bit about who you are, just your background, more interpersonal, introspective stuff. So if they come off as hard to answer, take as much time as you need. And then I'm sure we'll talk about SuperTri, Super League, the Genesis, and just all the different things you've done. But the first question that I would love to dive into is, from your perspective, who is Michael?
Who is Michael? I think Michael is an entrepreneur, self-driven entrepreneur. I would think, and I think as I am also an endurance athlete, I think grit is also a word that comes up relatively high, and I think grit is something that an entrepreneur and and an endurance athlete have in common.
Yeah.
So kind of comes well across both.
Yeah, for sure. So where are you from? Are you originally from London?
No, I'm originally from Belgium. Yeah, so I'm originally from Belgium. But haven't lived in Belgium since '99. So quite a few years. Spent about 20 years in Asia. 19. Yeah, 19. And then moved to London in 2019. And in Asia, I've been in China, Thailand, Taiwan, and Singapore.
Those the Asian Pacific division where you were at, was that all for Volkswagen?
No, just China was Volkswagen, and afterwards it was more like my journey as in triathlon. I mean, I started an event in Taiwan called Challenge Taiwan, which still runs and quite successfely. Then I did a bit of work in Thailand, and then ultimately I started SuperTri, and we started that out of Singapore. But continued then in London. So that's kind of in a nutshell the geographical journey.
Yeah, for sure. Interesting. So for you growing up, did you have siblings?
Yeah, one brother and one sister, but both younger.
Both younger. So you are the oldest of 3. I'm similar.
Yeah. yeah.
Tell me how that.
Brother and sister too, or
Two younger sisters. So
okay,
one is about 3, 4 years younger than me, and the other one's 12 years younger than me. So there's
okay.
quite the spread
Yeah,
there. Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, no, we're all a bit closer together. But a brother who's a year and a half younger, and a
Okay,
sister who's about 4. But yeah, okay.
okay. Did you grow up in an entrepreneurial household?
Um, both of my parents were lawyers, so by
Mm.
definition, I would say less entrepreneurial.
Yeah, sure.
But my mother's side of the family, like yeah, they're more entrepreneurs. They're more business ingrained. So yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. But it was just kind of something that always, yeah. I mean, we've always been inquisitive. Yeah. Uh,
Mm. Talk to me a little bit more about that. Like, what does that mean to be inquisitive?
Um. Yeah. I mean, I think as a family we're always encouraged to try and do new things, to explore. I mean, yeah, we traveled a lot. I mean, yeah. um like everybody was always interested in meeting different people, going to new places, etc. So be a bit more, yeah, do more like that, right? And then yeah, for me, my path, I mean, even like when I was young, I mean, when I was 11, I kind of decided, okay, for my what is, I don't know, in the UK it's 70 years, so I wanted to go to boarding school, right? And I had a
Mm.
specific view. Okay, I want to do that, and boarding school is not something that is very common in Belgium. There's not many. It's not that not common at all. But I said, okay, that's great because I want to be part of that, and the school is very famous for sports, so I want to do that. Then in terms of university, I also had my own kind of vision where I wanted to go. I didn't. In Belgium, there's like a city that is called Leuven, which is very popular for university, and basically everybody goes there or went somewhere else, right? So,
Mm.
and yeah, well, that was always encouraged at home. So kind of go create your own path.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it's interesting. The what you're telling me, it shows a lot about you having a lot of just visionary ability at a relatively young age, being relatively self-aware. Obviously, it's somewhat from nurture because you said your parents really pushed you to have that, to forge your own path.
yeah.
But do you think that any of that was nature as well, or is it mostly
Yeah,
all?
I think I think a big part of it is nature, because ultimately, yeah, my brother ended up doing the same thing as my father. So although he had the ability to venture off and was encouraged to venture off, he chose to stay closer to home, to in everything, right? In what he does, where he lives, where he works, uh, and everything. He is achieving a lot, but it's all closer to home, right? So I
Mm-hmm.
do think it's a lot of nature. I think what my parents did was always, yeah, encourage us to make our own decisions, right? Not say, oh, you have to go to this school, or you have to go to this school, or you have to do this, or you have to do that. Encourage to make our own decisions, right? And
Mm.
so therefore, yeah, that is what the environment what the environment encouraged. Nature is still what is ultimately kind of created, I guess, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, yeah.
How did you value education from like a high school, secondary education, all the way up to college? Because I know that, your parents being lawyers, they obviously valued education to a degree, but you are entrepreneurial, and sometimes there's this disconnect between the very entrepreneurial mindset, I'm going to go start my own thing, and,
Yeah.
being academic. So where do you stand?
Yeah, I've always been very critical. I mean, I did do I always felt I'm doing my parents a favor by indeed going to university and all of that. All of that. I
Yeah.
was always questioning, I can achieve more if I just create my own path now. To me, it always felt like, okay, it's just delaying my path for another 4 or 5 years, right?
Yeah.
um, but yeah, in hindsight, I think it's still very formative, right? In hindsight, I
Mm.
think it's still very formative. I mean, yeah, yeah, it just yeah, yeah. So I mean, but there was definitely that tension, that entrepreneur as an entrepreneur, where you want to break free and start doing stuff as quickly as possible, and the tension of not wanting to be in a mold that at least Belgian universities provide. Right.
Mm.
Yeah.
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 Did you find it easy or hard to make friends as you were growing up?
Um. I mean, I was always quite social, but yeah, social to a large group, but with a small group of friends. Yeah, yeah. And actually, some of those, although I've traveled a lot, right? So as I said, I spent about 20 years outside of Belgium. Um, so and okay, if you do like 2 years away and then come back, that's easy to maintain relationships. If you do 19 years away
Yeah.
and are in a completely different environment, it's harder to maintain those relationships because ultimately,
Mm.
like if I compare my rhythm of life, if you want, like to all the people that I went to high school with, right? They got kids earlier, they were settled in a certain work environment earlier, they joined certain milestones in their life that are now
Hmm.
not synced with what I've done, right? Which ultimately creates, yeah, social barriers to friendship, right?
Mm.
Definitely, and yes, just kind of being in a different culture for so long, it does the same thing. But yeah, nonetheless, there's a couple of friendships that from my high school days still survive. Like 2 weeks ago, I went surfing with a mate that I went surfing with when I was 16 years old, right? So
Yeah.
there is depth to certain relationships, but others, yeah, it just this kind of this async in lifestyles is makes it very very difficult.
Yeah. I'm curious to know your experience with the different Asian cultures, kind of comparing, contrasting to the European mindset, um, just the long-term versus short-term values, mentality. Like, what do you,
Yeah.
how was your experience?
I mean, I always love to be in places. I mean, like, yeah, if you look at on a very high level, right? Um, if you were to ask people in Europe, where will you be 5 years from now, right? Everybody would think, generally think would people would say, it's going to be hard, right? Or they wouldn't be very bullish, right? They were like, yeah, there'll probably aging population, yeah, there'll probably taxes will have to go up, this, that, right? I mean, everybody would have concerns, right? Whereas in China, I mean, like everybody was thinking, I can be a millionaire in 5 years, no problem. Probably a couple of my friends will be. It's just kind of will I achieve it or not, right? But this is the direction we're going, right? Everybody, basically, generally, everybody thinks 5 years everything will be a lot better than it is now, right? And
Mm,
and and I think you have this. I guess, yeah, this is kind of the cycle of the cycle of the world, right? The certain, yeah, let's say European economy or an American economy has grown a lot, and then kind of, yeah, somebody else has to, and then you kind of matured, right? And then somebody else is going through that growth spurt and then matures, right? And
mm,
it's all this cyclical behavior, and yeah, what is interesting that is, yeah, and obviously China in early 2000s, yeah, it came from a very troubled kind of history, right?
mm-hmm.
For the last kind of 30, 40 years before that, right? So yeah,
Yeah.
there was only upside for sure. Was quite
Yeah.
clear. There was no
Yeah.
doubt. So I think that's what you had very much, right? What you had in Asia versus what you have in the West, where everybody knew that most likely they'll be better off in 5 years' time. Whereas, yeah, in the West, that happened 50 years ago. That is not necessarily true anymore now,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that creates a very different dynamic,
Mm,
right? And it's kind of what happening now a little bit in the Middle East, right? A lot of people, at least here from Europe, all moving to Dubai. You see this whole hype, and because everybody in there thinks, oh, it will be better, and then there's a whole bunch of people who jump on that boat, right? They're like, oh, I'm going to go there because you'll have a mindset of people who just want to go and invest in stuff and break boundaries, create something new,
mm.
and you get sucked up on that and that kind of attitude, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's fascinating to me. When I was in college, I started a small business, and it afforded me the opportunity to do manufacturing in China. It's
yeah,
fresh out of college, so I got to go there and really experience that culture over a number of years up until COVID happened. And one thing that struck me, similar to what you're saying, is just the not only the long term mindset, but the investment in the long term
yeah,
relationship and potential of someone. Because I was a very small business, and the people who I worked with, I really had no realistic forecast to say like, oh, we're going to benefit you in this financial way, but they really invested in the relationship, brought me over, paid for me to stay there, introduced me to their friends and family.
yeah,
And it goes back to what you're saying too. It's interesting with the US. Europe's a little bit different because there's a lot longer of a history, but within the US, the culture is so fast paced and short term mindset, probably because we've only been around for 250 years. But
Yeah,
you're going back to the Chinese, you've got thousands of years of recorded history of ups and downs. And I really
yeah,
think that that really affects the people and how you raise your children and how you start a business. And
yeah,
it's not all about this rip roaring startup mindset, rah,
yeah.
rah, rah, as fast as you can. Yeah. It's
But
interesting.
there's also a big focus, and that kind of, there's also, they believe in community a lot more, right? So like if you look, I mean, I did some early
Mm,
2000s again, business in China. Wherever you went, there was a national international airport or a national airport or regional airport, right? And out of those airports, you had a 4-lane highway, right? And you had mobile phone connection, and you could go to something quite remote, quite very conveniently, and have still good media internet connection, right? If you go to India, you step out of an airport, it's dead, right? There's nothing.
yeah.
If you need to get 20 kilometers up the road, you'll spend an hour, right? And so,
All the
so,
potholes. Yeah.
but in China there is this element of, okay, collectively, this is for the benefit, right? It's also central run government. It's for the benefit. We're investing in infrastructure because as a whole we will benefit, right?
Mm,
And there's less focus on the individual, there's more
mm,
focus as on the whole, and that is the same thing. It reflects in personal relationships also, right? There's a more holistic view to a relationship,
mm,
and a longer term view, which is ingrained in their culture, I believe. I mean, I'm not
hmm.
saying it's bad or good, but it's culturally very different.
Yeah. Yeah, there's good and bad to it. What I struggle with here in the US is just the mindset of, oh, now China is the new Russia for us. It's like we just look at them as like, oh, they're communists, kind of throw the baby out with the bathwater. But realistically, we're so intertwined with them from a business perspective, and there's so many things that you can learn. I mean, even
Yeah,
though they are, the way that they are, um, in their communist values, they have these special economic zones where you can have lots of innovation happening really fast. And there's
yeah,
things that we could learn from them. But yeah, it's a fascinating culture. So I'm curious for you, like your first real corporate job out of college, it sounded like, was working with Volkswagen
yeah.
to go and to set up this, I believe, factory for automatic transmissions.
The first one was that, and we were sent as Volkswagen investment company, and at the time Volkswagen had two joint ventures. I mean, so you needed to set up a joint venture as an automotive company. You needed to set up a joint venture to assemble cars, right? And you had
Mm-hmm.
these big state-owned companies, and they were producing all the cars, which basically meant you had a Volkswagen, and next to it was Ford. Next to it was all the brands were produced by the same manufacturer, is assembled by the same manufacturers, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
back in the early 2000s, we went in as a wholly owned investment group, right? And ultimately the idea was, okay, this joint venture, or this joint venture in the north and this joint venture in the south, they both have their kind of supplier bases, right? But why don't we kind of try to synergy, kind of find the synergy effects, and find one supplier for everything we're doing, qualify him, and then start exporting, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
Volkswagen is obviously Volkswagen, Skoda, Audi. So we were producing 4 or 5 different brands in China, and we were buying from different suppliers just because we inherited them from the platform plans we had joint ventures with. And like, okay, let's bring them under our own umbrella and let's qualify them, and then let's start exporting, right? Because if you buy 100,000 screws from somebody, or you buy 1 million screws, you'll get a better price for 1 million, right? So,
Yeah,
and,
sure.
and that was simply the idea, and that was the first few years, and then afterwards, the idea was, because, well, China has import tax on cars, right? So to actually be competitive in the market, right? I mean, obviously some high end, like some high end Audis, or some high, like uh, high-end brands, they don't, import tax doesn't really matter, but generally, for what you want to sell to the normal consumer, it is relevant. So we
Mm-hmm.
started making we started to see, okay, what do we need to do to be considered local, right? And that's where the gearbox plant came in, because we found, okay, if we produce gearboxes, engines, and assemble local, it's considered a local car, and then there is no
No
import
tax.
taxes,
Yeah.
right? And so yeah, we had this whole, and I got involved because I had a good understanding of the supplier base because of the first project. I knew what suppliers were good, what the suppliers could do well, and what didn't work, right? And what we actually had to build ourselves if we wanted to do something in China, because yeah, it's not simply replicating what happens in Germany, because in Germany you produce in a certain way, which fits with the German labor force, let's say, which fits with
Hmm.
the supplier base around it. But other stuff, yeah, there's certain stuff that we wanted that they do in-house in Germany does not make sense to do it in China because somebody else can do it a lot better, right? And it's
Mm.
just kind of rejiggling the value chain to make it fit. And I had a good understanding of how rejiggle the value chain to make it
Hmm.
fit for the ultimate goal, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. Were you, when you were presented with this challenge, was it difficult for you to make the decision whether to accept or deny it just based on you being so entrepreneurial? Like,
Well, I mean, no, it's actually my entrepreneur, because I was still fairly junior, right?
hmm.
They were talking about this plant that they wanted to build up, right? And they had some, and they were talking about it, and they were just kind of replicating what happened in Germany. They wanted to do it again in China, right? And I was sitting in the third row of a meeting, and suddenly raised my hand and said, like, that's a shit idea. That works in Germany. It will not work in China, right? And actually, yeah, I was too outspoken. I mean, I remember my boss at the time looking at me like, shut up, this is not your place to say anything, right?
Yeah, yeah.
but luckily the guy who was making the decisions, it resonated with him. Like, what, this actually sounds interesting. Why do you say this? And he heard me out, and he kind of, ah, yeah, it's indeed, it's a little bit presumptuous from us to say things in China will work the same as in Germany. Actually, we need to consider the local market, right? And yeah, and I was lucky because I could have gone the other way also. They could have gone, you, you're not senior enough to sit here.
Hmm.
Zip your mouth. Listen, we will make decisions, right? So yeah, I was lucky that the guy who was making those decisions was actually open to a different point of view. So I would argue it's actually my entrepreneurial mindset, or
They got you that position.
that got me that position. Yeah.
Mm. So then I guess this might be an appropriate time to introduce for you personally, when did endurance sport and triathlon start to enter the scene? And then was it after this stint in China? I mean, you said you worked there for 19 years, so this is obviously a long period of time. But what took place between that project and then when you decided to take a step away from the corporate world?
But I mean, for me, the touch points with endurance sport was way before that. I mean, I
Okay.
chose my school because they did a lot of sports, right? And actually, this and then cycling is always big in Belgium, big cycling
Mm-hmm.
culture. Um, but yeah, the touch point with triathlon was 1996 when Luc van Lierde won Ironman Hawaii, right? I mean,
Mm,
and that just had a massive impact. And I started, and well, all my friends and myself, we all started to do triathlon, right? I mean, next thing as cycling, we all started to do triathlon, and it kind of and yeah, and then it stuck with me. So the multi-sport aspect stuck with me throughout my whole corporate career. I continued to run, I continued to cycle where I could, right? Swimming a little less so, but okay. And ultimately, yeah, living in China, I went and did little races in Korea, little races in Japan, little races in Thailand, and it was kind of, the holiday was just always an active holiday, and always ended up to be around a triathlon of some sort, right? With
mm,
like-minded people. So that very much became part of my identity, and it was only after the projects in China, with Volkswagen, then they were, because I was an expat, they kind of said, look, you've done your time, now you go back to Germany, and then we'll send you to somewhere else when the next cool project comes up. And I'm like, I want to try something different. I
mm.
mean, this was really working 7 days a week. I lived in a hotel for 3 years, right? So
Oh
I
my
mean, like,
goodness.
and so I was like, no, I'll take a sabbatical if you're offering me that, and I want to qualify for Hawaii, right? I want to go to Kona. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
this is kind of my dream, right?
Yep.
And actually, yeah, so they agreed I could take a sabbatical. I said, well, China is not the greatest place to train, but I wanted to stay in kind of the Chinese language. So I moved to Taiwan and started training almost full time. I still studied a bit of Chinese, but started almost training full time. And that's how I got into triathlon more as a business, because when I was training, I got into the community. Then I raced an event in New Zealand called Challenge Wanaka. I met the
Mm-hmm.
Walshiffer family who own Challenge Roth, right? And I'm like, look, guys, yeah, why don't I help you guys set up more in Asia, right? And that's kind of how I started my first triathlon business. just because I couldn't just train. I wanted to do something more than just train, right? And
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and that's then the beginning. And from there, I met Chris McCormack, and I met this, and I did that, and I did, and it's kind of just continued to roll.
Yeah, yeah. So you seem to be a very confident and enabled person for like building relationships. Would you agree with that?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I confident. Yeah, I'm just driven, I guess, right?
Yeah.
I don't know whether confident is the right word, but it's kind of it's just single-minded, right? Like for
Mm,
example, okay, I started Challenge Family, I started Challenge Taiwan because of Challenge Family. I said, okay, I need to make this big. How do I make it big? Okay, who's the biggest name in triathlon? Chris McCormack was at the time the biggest name in triathlon, so I'll call him, right? Like
it's a
it's
no-brainer. Yeah.
yeah, it's a no-brainer. It's just what you have to do, right? So
Hmm.
let's email him, and then yeah, he answered, okay, let's take it from here, right? And yeah, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, right? But it's not about confidence. I think it's about yeah, just doing shit and then being resilient because more than half the time it doesn't work, and then it's about being resilient then, right? I think
Mm,
most people yeah they make too much drama out of doing something and then they make even more drama if it doesn't work, right?
mm, yeah.
Like don't make too much drama, do it, fail, do it better, and just action, right? If you
Yeah.
just action, it's sometimes it works better.
Yeah. When did you realize like, okay, this is the industry that I want to spend literally all of my time investing into? Was that relatively immediate?
Yeah, I mean, I remember there was a moment. I mean, it is a balancing act, right? Because yeah, I did a I had Volkswagen. I mean, obviously it's a big organization. I mean,
Hmm.
I did a good job, and there was a career path kind of revealing itself, right?
Hmm.
That gives a lot of security. Um, yeah, and then like with starting an event in triathlon, no there's no career path that reveals itself, right? You don't know what tomorrow will be.
Hmm.
Yeah, there's yeah, and the career paths that possibly reveal themselves are not necessarily very engaging. I remember because after kind of 2 years my my sabbatical so with Volkswagen was off, so I needed to decide, do I go back or not, right? And I said, look, I'll continue down this path, right? And yeah, my father jumped in a plane to try to convince me for 3 days that that was a stupid idea, right? Because nothing was revealing itself,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it was only the last dinner that he gave up trying to convince that we actually had a normal conversation. uh, but yeah, so and there was definitely then like a little bit after that, I was kind of considering, and I went back into corporate for a little stint for about 7 8 months to kind of think,
Oh,
well,
really?
maybe maybe there is a bit too much insecurity around that. Maybe this is more
Mm,
of a passion play, and I can kind of balance it on the alongside having a corporate job, right? But then, yeah, either you do something or you don't do it. So I kind of yeah rotated out of that relatively. Like, I think it was 9 months or something. Rotated out of that and say, look, I'll if I let's have a crack, right? And since
yeah.
then, yeah, it's just continuous rolling.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
don't think
yeah.
too much about what will be in 10 years. Think
Mm.
about focus on today and tomorrow.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah. Survival. Well, I want to
yeah.
go back just for a second. Like the fact that you mentioned that your father flew out to see you for 3 days and worked on convincing you up until that last dinner, that says a lot about your relationship with him. But I'm curious from your perspective, were you were you seeking your father's approval to figure out what to do? Like, did you ask him to come to that aid to like help you make a decision, or was this something that, like, how was your dynamic with him and your relationship during that
No,
time?
I think he's I like I've no I mean the dynamic is more that yeah he has a certain I mean, as I said, my mother has more of an entrepreneurial side of the family, and my mother and her mother, my grandmother, actually has always encouraged me to be entrepreneurial and to do something
Hmm.
new. My father has always advocated for a more traditional path, right? So yes,
Right.
this is a clear manifestation of that, but it's been throughout that that I was looking to for encouragement to my grandmother and my mother,
Hmm.
and then my father to kind of question, right?
Yeah,
And,
it's a
and
good
and and
balance.
and and typically me resisting against that. Right? So I guess, yeah.
Is your father proud of you?
I suppose so. I should ask him the question.
Yeah,
Uh, yeah.
that's interesting. So then you decided after 7 or 8 months, this isn't for me, and you go back. What was the thing that you started doing after that? Was
Oh,
that the
just
challenge?
commit more
More
time.
time.
Yeah, commit more time. And I always kind of okay, that was continuing challenge Taiwan. I was committing more to it, but I also started quickly looking. Okay, what is bigger, right? Because I mean, as a foreigner running an event a triathlon event in Taiwan, what's the bigger opportunity? Where does this go, right? And I think where I have to probably challenge myself. I always have. I mean, yeah, I always want to move fast and see big things, right? I mean, I have a philosophy like the same with Volkswagen. I find it very exciting to build a new plant from scratch because you make bold moves, right?
Hmm.
Once, I mean, as soon as that plant hits start of production, I'm out, right? Because all you do then, in my opinion, is fine tuning details, less exciting. Right,
Hmm.
so yeah, I want to, I like growth, right, and then I need strong, yeah, and it's good partners and a good team that kind of can then work in the details and refine that, right?
Yeah.
I think, yeah, and I think because yeah, throughout this whole journey, it's always been creating a team, right, and building people around me who kind of do all the stuff that I'm not good at, right,
Yeah.
and recognizing that, right?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
talk to me about the genesis of the idea and then the founding of Super League, which would become Super Try.
Well, so we've always tipped. It's all everything what I've done since kind of Volkswagen has always been in and around triathlon, and then ultimately, um, yeah, we've done a couple of few things together with Chris McCormack, Macca,
Hmm.
and then so who also has obviously a deep passion for triathlon. He was a professional athlete himself, right? And then we met a third individual, Leonid Boguslavsky. He's an investor by trade, and he discovered triathlon much later in life, right? And yeah, and ultimately the idea then was, okay, what can we do new in triathlon, right? So how can we innovate triathlon? How can we create a future for triathlon, right? And do something different. Where's the blue ocean, basically, right?
Hmm.
And I say and ultimately we went back to our own experience. And I'll go back to my own experience. We're inspired into the sport by seeing a professional or by a story. By I mean, for me, Luc van Lier, the winning Ironman Hawaii, right? So you're 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 inspired by a story, and yeah, and ultimately, yeah, we then kind of said, look, if we want to build a future for triathlon, we don't need to compete with Ironman. Ironman does a fantastic job, right? We need to create something new, and ultimately, yeah, we need to make it, which means we need to fill a void. And what is the void is you look at today how people consume media. You look at today what people want to do, right? They don't want to necessarily, not everybody wants to commit to train 20 hours or 15 hours or 10 hours a week to get ready for a race that will take them 15 hours on average, or if you do a half, let's say 6 or 7 hours on average, right? Some people just want to be entertained, and some people just want to do a triathlon. So we kind of took complete liberties with the formats to create something that is much more exciting, much more accessible, like creates great moments on TikTok, right? That can be shared, etc. Right? And yeah, and that was the approach. Let's create something for the next generation. Let's create something that can make triathlon cool again, attract new audiences, and then let's see whether attracting those new audiences, whether we can inspire them to compete, right? So we say inspire the competitor and everyone. Can we, if you watch this cool racing, if you watch these guys race, are you then afterwards inspired to do it yourself, right? And that's kind of the flywheel that we're now building.
Hmm.
Yeah.
How many times have you come close to death as an organization?
uh, Many times. I
Every
mean,
day?
less every day now, but yeah, in the beginning, the first approach was, look, okay, let's try one event, and let's see whether people are actually, let's see whether people are actually interested. If I say people, are the professional athletes interested in racing it, and do they think it's exciting, and they like, do they leave like, oh, this was great, right? Are
Mm-hmm.
people actually watching it, and are comments interesting, right? Is Does media outlets even want to showcase and broadcast it, or they think, well, here's more of what we don't need, right? uh, so yeah, that was the beginning phase, and afterwards, yeah, COVID hit, which is obviously pretty dramatic, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and frankly speaking, on the board level was like, okay, Michael, what do we do now? Hibernate, or let's fire everybody, and let's see what happens after this, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, let's innovate, right? And we created an esport version of triathlon, right? So yeah, so there's definitely been a few instances where we have to, yeah, be creative, right? uh, be close to death, but I mean, yeah, not look at death, look at the other side and think, what are we creating here?
Yeah. So I'm curious then, when you were working with Volkswagen, Audi, like that whole group, and you're setting up a factory, like you said, well, you need to make bold moves to set it up. And then once it's set up, you have the people who are really better at that job, fine tuning the process. Have you, do you think that you will ever approach a segment of the journey with Super Try that is that where you've set it up and now it's just fine tuning, or are you still far away from that?
I mean, there's definitely elements within the business that are more that are set up, right? I would say our professional race series is set up, and ultimately I have a great team of guys that are developing, that are delivering those races, and they're fine tuning the processes and making that
Mm-hmm.
more seamless, right? So, yeah, it's then like, yeah, I then start look. I mean, you look at the bigger picture, that flywheel. How can we integrate? What is now missing? How can we do? How can we grow? How can we help grow the sport, right? And ultimately, yeah, I see now a big the next piece of the flywheel, basically providing a mass participation experience, right? And making short course cool again, right? And not just Ironman is inspirational, aspirational, and I want to tick the box, put the tattoo. I've done an Ironman. I've done that, right? I think what the sport also needs is iconic urban events that people who are maybe not as committed as to training 10 hours a week every week, right? But that want to do a couple of triathlons, and they see it more as a lifestyle choice that kind of runs throughout the years, right? Rather than actually being very committed, right? So I want to fill that gap now, right? And so, and I'm looking now very much in, okay, how do we build out this portfolio of mass participation, and how do we create, how do we inspire, how do we leverage the professional event series to inspire the the people to come and participate, and become part of triathlon, right? And how do we actually
Mm,
grow the sport?
yeah.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting challenge. And look, yeah, driven by data, right? From the beginning, we've always done our surveys, and if you come and watch, are you actually already interested in triathlon, or are you new to the sport, right? And if you come and watch, do you leave that thinking, hey, I want to try this, right? And then if you want to try this, what is your hurdle? Why are you not trying this, right? And then,
Mm-hmm.
then breaking that down, I think that's where I spend a lot of my time now. But also in the reverse, how we then use our professional athletes, or use our professional events to keep the community engaged, right? And actually drive and build the professional athletes to become more famous and be more, yeah, full-fledged influencers in their own rights as such, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
You strike me as someone who, because I'm comparing the growth of Super Try, Super League, whatever, Super Try now. I keep wanting to
yeah,
say Super League. With Super Try now, you strike me as obviously the visionary who wants to keep pushing, innovating, and continuing to grow this sport. Do you have you ever watched like the Formula One series on Netflix?
yeah. I've watched the first few seasons. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, you remind me of Toto. Like similarly with obviously Formula One's a lot different, but there seems to be a bit of overlap in inspiration. Do you draw inspiration from like those high octane type of sports to kind of overlay and deliver that similar package for the triathlon?
I mean, I think there's a lot that can be learned from all different sports, right? And I think,
Sure.
like, yeah, if you took you touch on Formula One, I think, and what Drive to Survive does brilliantly, it's just kind of zoom out, right? And
Hmm.
suddenly add so many different storylines, right? And even if you're not a petrol head and not interested in cars, you're interested in the dynamics
The
like of the
story.
business and the decisions that Toto and all these other guys need to make, or you get more or in the management styles, etc. So I think that is definitely, yeah, there's definitely a lot that can be learned from other sports, how, yeah, what happens in the periphery and how much value that can deliver and how that can be attractive to audiences, right?
Hmm.
And any sport who is not doing that is just kind of, yeah, is missing a trick, right? Because like when I was young, we used to watch the game on television and that's it, right? You see the game, that's it. Now I argue more people are engaged with everything else than people are actually watching the game as such, right?
Yeah.
They will see all the content around it. They will know who they're dating, what's happening in their private life, what's happening with the managers. I mean, back in the day, we didn't really care who the manager was. He was a nobody. It was the game, the players, and the team. That's it,
Mm.
right? But now everybody else plays a big role.
Yeah. So taking into consideration the ship that is SuperTri and you being more or less at the helm of this, how would you rate yourself as a leader in terms of not just your leadership on an interpersonal level, but at the direction, the speed that this ship is heading? Like, how do you think you're doing?
uh, that's obviously pure perception, right? Because what is fast to me is slow to somebody else, etc.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I think, yeah, as an organization, we are still small and nimble and fast moving, right? And I think and yeah, we are pushing boundaries. I think as an organization, and what I always want to strive for is to continue to innovate, to continue to learn from different things, right? And push things forward. Um, but I think, yeah, as an organization, we have also matured to a certain extent that I've been able to bring in new people who also deal with the stability pieces of things, right? And
Yeah.
actually build a well-oiled machine, right? Not just
Mm.
an inspirational spaceship, right?
Yeah.
So I think that combo, that's where we have probably matured. I probably struggle a little bit that the pace has gone out of it a little bit. The nimbleness and the pace has gone out of it. But as an overarching, if I take a step back, I would still say, yeah, we are still very nimble and still very fast moving, right? But yeah, so
What is the single greatest need of the organization right now? Might
um,
be a list of things.
yeah, I mean, the single greatest need. Um, but we're fundraising, so capital has to be somewhere on top of that list. I think, yeah, I think scale is what we need to kind of really make to really make a bigger blast, right? I mean, if we want to be a big player in North America, I think there's an opportunity now with LA Olympics, triathlon being Olympic sport, to create a buzz around short course triathlon. But we need scale, which means we need 10, 15 events, right? So that we have multiple touch points in the market, right? So yeah, scale is a big thing, and you need capital to do scale, right? And okay, capital as in cash, but also we need to be able to expand the team. So human capital, like we need to be able to grow our people quickly, right?
Yeah.
Uh, I think we're still very much in that phase of ambitious growth with that, yeah.
Yeah, I've heard just through the rumor mill like that it's been pretty difficult to get things to attach to the US market as similarly as Europe, just because I think the cultural values, the age of the country, the sports that are popular. Would you
Yeah.
agree with that?
Well, uh, it's there's a different history, right? Ironman is the A and O in the US, right? So it's all long course triathlon. I mean, if you say triathlon, everybody thinks Ironman, whereas in Europe, short course triathlon is much more a thing. And you look at the Olympic success outside of Gwen Jorgensen, it's
Hmm.
all been Europeans, right? Because yeah, that culture for short course racing is much more existing. I mean, you have things, you have short course series in France, you have short course series in Germany that actually make regional television. there is no short course in America anymore. It's dead, right?
Yeah.
Everything is Ironman. So yeah, uh, so there is definitely a cultural shift to kind of say, hey, short course is also a thing, right? Then for us, yeah, it's also a little bit about timing. We bought an event in the US just before COVID. That obviously makes it a bit more difficult. Then
Yeah.
afterwards, yeah, we come out of COVID. There was a bit of a regroup. We had a new baby with SuperTri E with the esports thing, uh, and yeah, and so actually now is a time for us after Paris to take the US truly serious, right? And so I would say, yeah, we're tackling that now. Everything that happened until now is not been a serious attempt,
Yeah.
and it's always been clear that it needs a serious attempt just because where short course sits historically, and that is
Hmm.
that yeah that's the last decades, right? Where uh, it's all been long course in America, and whereas in Europe it's much more short course and long course, but a lot more balance.
Yeah. Do you see a future where it becomes as popular or increasingly more popular in the US?
But I think I mean, we need the sport to be popular, in my opinion, right? And I think, like, I'm trying to build a brand for short course that is all about short endurance. You don't do more. It's 3 hours, shorter than 3 hours as a participant,
Hmm.
right? That is complementary to Ironman, and I think, or to T100 for that matter, right? So I think um, we have to coexist, and I think, like, for me, if the so it's not one or the other. I think we complete a pie or we complete a puzzle, and if we can complete that puzzle, I think the sport is competing with other sports, right? I mean, let's say participation sports are going to grow over the next 5 years. There's a big trend that supports that. People want to
Hmm.
be healthy. People want to want to be more fit. They also want to have that community of going to events and participating, right? Um, Running boom is always the perfect example of that of the beginning, and then afterwards
Mm.
people want to do something else, right? Triathlon boomed in 2012, 2013, 2014 because yes, that trend already starting, and then people do running, and then they want to do something else, and there was nothing else to do outside of triathlon. But now you have a lot more. You have high rocks, you have gravel riding, you have trail running, etc., etc. So we as
Hmm.
triathlon need to offer a nice mixture of different things. We are solving a short course which makes the sport accessible. T100 Ironman are delivering something on long course, right? What I'd like to see is like a loyalty program for triathlon, like an air mile program, right? Where okay, I do some with this brand, I do some with this brand, I do some in this brand. But like for example, if I look at myself, yeah, when I got kids, like I had no more time to train an Ironman. Did I stop doing triathlon? Not really. I started to do short course now. Now I'm doing half Ironmans a little bit more, etc. So I'm getting
Hmm.
more back into it. But I continue to be a member of the triathlon community as such, right? And depending on your career path or your family life or what happens, yeah, that ping pongs. So I think, yeah, a rising tide make all boats rise, right? And we should actually work together and grow triathlon as a cool sport, promote short course, promote long course, promote middle course,
Mm.
tell stories that integrate and that are appealing to a wider audience and draw them into our sport and grow it. So yeah, very long answer. So
That's a
I'm
good
not,
answer. I like it.
yeah, but it's not a balancing. It's we have to do it all. We all have to grow.
Yeah, so strategic partnerships are key, and in
Yeah,
theory, they're relatively easy to talk about. But then when you get people with egos surrounding a table and trying to figure out what those partnerships look like, that can be
yeah.
a difficult animal to try to tame. Are you finding success in setting up those types of strategic partnerships?
We have conversations indeed. The detail. I mean, like I think overarching the benefits outweigh the troubles. I mean, yeah, the obvious problems is like the calendar, right? I mean, yeah, how do you balance a calendar and make sure that it is, yeah, you don't create too much friction for athletes, right? And you create opportunities actually. That's but okay. Yeah, individual event organizers don't always have control of the calendar because the cities have a say in that, right? So I mean, so there is points of friction, and yeah, I think it takes a lot of conversation, and it takes a lot of collaboration to kind of overcome those points of friction, and then kind of see, um, yeah, and see the bigger picture, right? But I do think that, yeah, generally there's opportunities, and the other leaders of the big triathlon brands seem to understand. I have a common interest in seeing that, yeah, as a sport we actually shouldn't compete with each other, but we actually should look at
Partner.
the future of the sport, and that is by all being strong and
So do you think
collaborate.
it? Yeah, do you think there'll be a day when you have like in a weekend surrounded with Ironman and like Super Try coming in and doing events in the same weekend? Like,
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure whether that is the answer. That could be the answer for certain events. I think that's kind of sends a nice message. But I think it's, yeah, for me the opportunity is more, as I said, the airline kind of program, right? Where, look, yeah, I get an understanding if I do 10 SuperTri events. I'm getting some credits against something, some benefits in an Ironman race, and I'm also getting like some
hmm
guidance how. I mean, because maybe I find the distance a bit scary, so I like, how does it all work for me, right? And how does the community share with each other? I think that's where then, creating an integrated community. I think that's where the bigger opportunity lies than synergy effects of hosting an event. I think logistically, it's probably you probably run in logistical challenges, and then you're thinking,
hmm
okay, just putting one massive event on, what
It's
are
already,
we
yeah.
what are we actually winning outside of, what are we actually winning, right? I mean,
Yeah.
the real benefit is if we can enrich a community, and if everybody comes together and kind of, yeah, paint pathways, create dynamics, set new challenges, and yeah, they pull people in, pull people up, bring people back down, and those dynamics can work, right?
hmm
Whether the event happens on the same day or not,
Yeah.
I'm not sure
Yeah.
whether
Who
that is
knows?
the key point.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting. So you're obviously eating, sleeping, living triathlon 24/7 pretty much now. What part of this journey is the most or has proved to be the most fulfilling for you?
Well, the journey itself, I think, is it's like, yeah, because often you get asked, oh, what is your work-life balance? Or yeah, I mean, there is no work-life balance. I mean, I mean, I always say I only have one life, and my life is as an entrepreneur who loves triathlon, right? And everything revolves around that. And sometimes I need to de-stress. I go and play with my kids. Sometimes I need to de-stress and I work a bit, right? So, but they all interact with each other, right? So yeah. Yeah, it's triathlon 24/7, but it's the same. It is, everything is 24/7.
Yeah.
It's one big melting pot that is just, yeah, driving things forward.
Mm. Yeah, you mentioned family there. Like you have three boys,
Yeah,
and you've been married for a while. So there
yeah,
there is a lot of because you said there's real no thing as work life balance, but spending time with your family, working, those are things that you have to figure out how to
yeah,
disperse your time amongst. How does
yeah.
that working for you?
Yeah, it's. Yeah, yeah, probably my kids will probably, and my wife will maybe have a different answer, but I think, yeah, it's all working quite well. I mean, my oldest boy is 9 years old. Last year I took him to um to our event in Long Beach, right? And he did the kids run, and then he was standing at the finish line handing out medals for an hour. So yeah, they
Cute.
breathe. Like, I really try to integrate them in the lifestyle of triathlon, right? They're big swimmers, all of them, right? So yeah, so really try to integrate them into this as a lifestyle, right? And yeah, they know the athletes, they come to the events, they hang around with it. I think, yeah, and I think that is a great experience for them too, right? Because yeah, it inspires them. So yeah, I think post COVID with more working from home has probably helped a little bit.
hmm
Although then on the other side, yeah, my struggle is, okay, how do we create with a growing team? How do we, if there's so much remote, how do we still create that boiler room tension that is, I think, is also still critical, right?
Mm.
But yeah, so yeah, I mean, it's a constant challenge, and I think it kind of, there is no such thing as a rigid solution. I think it kind of evolves. But yeah, for me, is in integration. Like I bring the family into the journey. They're all part of it. They know what I'm doing. They know the athletes. They know the colleagues. They come to the events. They see what it means, right? And the other way around also, right? It's for the rest of the team that works with us. They all understand that this is a lifestyle choice, right? So it kind of goes both ways, and I think you
Yeah.
get most out of people like that.
Yeah, for sure. So what gets you in the zone as an individual, whether it's stuff that you got to do at home, stuff you got to do at work, getting into training, what are the things that you do that really get you in the zone?
Well, I mean, it's a funny question, and I have a bit of I mean, what obviously it's I love a run, right? Going out and I have a run, but I guess that works for other people. What I also like to do is, for example, clean up the counter and clean up the dishes, etc. I think just
Yeah,
like a simple
I'm the same way.
routine, like a simple thing, like I spend in the evening, kind of okay. Empty the dishwasher, fill the dishwasher again, clean everything up, clean the table. Da, 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 da. All right, I feel like I feel good now because I've done my part of this. I like it clean, so that brings me in a certain zone of okay, things is good, things are
Yeah,
stable.
yeah.
uh,
No,
yeah,
so I can't go to bed in the evening unless the kitchen is clean and
yeah,
the living room is picked up. And there's just something about the cleanliness that helps me rest and sleep. So I can totally relate. Even before I work in the mornings, yeah, if things are a little bit messy, I have to clean them up. There's just something
yeah.
about the clean space is a clean head.
Yeah. I can't deal with my kids' rooms anymore. That's
Yeah,
I
just
ignore
close the
them.
door.
But if
Yeah,
if the kitchen is clean and like the breakfast table, etc., if that all of that is clean, then I can sneak into my office and it's like okay, yeah, the
yeah,
kitchen is clean and I'm in the office. It's in my safe zones.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's funny. Are you religious? Are you a spiritual man?
I mean, religion. I am a spiritual man in a sense. In a sense, yes. But I've lived in so many different countries that I don't. I'm not. I'm Catholic. I went to boarding school yeah, with yeah, in a monastery. So yes, I mean there's history there, but I've explored different chains of thoughts throughout my whole life. So, but yeah, spiritual, yes, religious, if depending on how you define that.
Yeah, how would you define it? Like, what are your current worldviews and where do you sit?
uh, I mean, look, I mean, I believe in purpose, right? I believe in balance. Yeah, I believe in I believe you need to. Yeah, I believe in kind of. I believe in. I guess from Christianity, I believe in work, right? So you need to do work to earn something, right? That's a typical value that we kind of learn. So a little bit of suffering to earn something is a value that I do believe in. Yeah. But yeah, it's I conceptualize many of these elements much more than actually religious going to church and doing things like that, right? I draw some of the concepts down and implement them.
Mm. If I may dig a little bit deeper, I'm just curious. Aside from the outward display of like a kind of earning or the character values settled around work ethic and being kind to others, from a receiving end, have you ever or do you ever have um, like interactions with what you would say is God or like an inner voice or something like that?
I mean, I believe in gut. If I'm not sure whether that translates, but I believe
Sure.
in gut, right?
Okay.
And an inner voice and the kind of the direction of this is good or bad, right? And listening to your gut or to your inner voice. Yeah, I do rely on that because yeah, a lot of decisions that I make, it's difficult to quantify them
Mm,
outside of that, right?
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So you more operate from a position of like following your gut rather than the logic of the specific data. I mean, as you grow the company, I would imagine you have to rely a little bit more on data. But would you say that you operate more from your head or your heart?
Uh, I mean. look, I would look at all the data, but then yeah, then it goes to gut, right? Even if the
Mm,
data the data will inform, the data will not the data will inform, the data will not necessarily point a decision. I'm not afraid of making a decision that doesn't fully align with the data. If I
mm,
if my gut feels okay, this is the right thing to do,
mm.
and it might
Yeah,
still be wrong, right? So I mean, I'm
yeah,
not saying that my gut is great always.
yeah.
Uh,
Well, I think that's what it takes to be like an actual visionary leader. Because sometimes all of the signs that you see, written in the cards or however you want to, whatever metaphor you want to use, it's sometimes you have that gut feeling that pushes you and drives you to do something else. And I think that's where most people
yeah,
would not operate. So that's what it takes to be a bit
but
different.
I like, I mean, but in that part of the process of relying on to data, I also rely on a lot of opinions, right? So
Mm,
I really try to listen and take the time to listen to different opinions and different people and hear different perspectives, right? So
mm,
yeah, I want to make an informed gut decision, not a
mm.
just a gut decision based
Yeah,
on just what I woke up with, right?
yeah.
It's yeah, I prefer an informed gut decision.
Yeah, there's wisdom in a multitude of counselors for sure.
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
yes. That's a good way of
Even
putting
yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So, how has your definition of success changed over time since when you first stepped foot in the corporate world to where you are now with three kids, a family, an organization that it will live or die by your leadership? Like, how does your definition of success change?
Yeah, I think. Um, I mean, like, yeah, I think the big perspective is more. Um, you don't have to have the answers, right? Or actually, you don't have to have a definition of what good looks like, right?
Mm,
Invest more in the process, or trust more in the process, and yeah, and adjust the process. Um, don't get too hung up on yeah, where you think you have to be in 5 days from now or in 1 year from now. Invest in a solid process and invest in solid systems and structures and focus on that. Where, yeah, I think that's kind of that's interesting. Where uh, yeah, where in the beginning I was too much focused on okay, there's my goal, and now I'm benchmarking, and I don't see it yet. I don't see it yet, and get panicked about that.
mm,
um, I think yeah, you have to have the vision, but then very much just yeah, work through the motions and work at what you can change today, right?
yeah.
Yeah. That definitely very different approach, and then yeah, work with people more, right? Yeah.
Mm. Have you been tempted ever to let this go and go do something else?
Um, Uh, no, no. I mean, look, have I questioned things and said, yes, for sure. Have I wanted to let it go? No.
Yeah,
uh, yeah,
yeah. Kind of like being a father, I would imagine.
yeah, yeah,
Can't let your kids go, but I'm
yeah,
not a father yet, but I look forward to it. But I've heard that there's a lot of parallel there with
yeah,
starting something and, being your baby.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, is there any question that I should have asked you?
Oh, well, you've asked some very interesting questions and a different style of questions. So I wouldn't say they're stupid questions, but interesting questions.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. um, what are we like? Yeah, I would say I'm thinking out loud, right? Because it's a very
I like
different
that.
direction of how a flow of kind of a conversation goes, right?
Hmm.
Um, is there anything else that I think within this framework is worth sharing? I mean, yeah, I guess like one reflection if we go through the conversation the way we've gone through it, right? It's uh, one thing that I kind of spurs to mind is to say there's no right or wrong, right? Because what I come across, because I do also a little bit of investment in other there's people are aspiring to be an entrepreneur and think it's all good, right? But if I look at my
Mm,
own experiences and my own dynamics, right, you're either you're either suitable for this lifestyle or you're not, right? And not everybody has to become suitable for this lifestyle, right? Of pursuing something like this. And I feel like in today's world, sometimes it is a little bit too much idealized, right? Like, yeah, if you pursue your own way and you become an entrepreneur and you have that drive, that is the best thing to do. Well, no, it's one way of doing it. It has all his ups and downs, but I think I definitely don't want to. Yeah, I don't think, yeah, I encourage people not to think, oh, that's where the grass is greener, right?
Mm-hmm.
I reflect on my life now and I see it at my friends, maybe people who have done other stuff, and I envy them in certain things, right? Because they have followed their path, and it's maybe a little less entrepreneurial. They followed more into a model of what the family has done and what their fathers and grandfathers has done before them, and be less risk taking, but they have great lives and great satisfaction, right? So I think, yeah, whilst we are talking about the excitement of being an entrepreneur, yeah, I think there's a lot of other stuff that is also very exciting, right? And I think
Mm.
a lot of people, if you were to ask me what is your advice to other people, is like, I do what you want to do, right? And if you don't see, and yeah, being an entrepreneur and trying to do different things is not necessarily the right thing for everybody, right? You don't want to
Mm-hmm.
deal with the stress of that. It's frustrating, right? It's
Mm.
annoying. It gives so much uncertainty, right? You can be you can be there's more happiness sometimes in something else, right? If
Mm.
that's more what suits you, right? So I think, yeah, I mean, it's not really direct an answer to you, but I feel like if we're having
No, it
these
is.
conversations, we're talking very much about, yeah, I'm talking how I'm passionate about my journey, but yeah, I also think we have to counterbalance that and
Yeah.
say, yeah, my journey is my journey. It has its ups and downs, and an entrepreneur is one way of living. There's other ways of living that are
Mm.
at least that are very satisfying also. And if you're good at that, you'll be even more satisfied
Mm.
than yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that kind of balance I think is sometimes important to strike.
Yeah, I would agree. To use, an industry that you're familiar with, like a car, there's many pieces of a car,
Yeah,
and some of them are get a lot of attention, like the engine or the tires, but no one thinks about, the interconnecting mechanisms that transfer fluids, from the
yeah,
engine to wherever else. And some
yeah,
people are really good at being that very specific chain link on a chain,
yeah,
or that specific hose that transports
yeah,
this fuel to that line, or whatever it is. So yeah, I think that there's a lot to be said in that. With entrepreneurship, it's interesting. In the past 15 or so years, entrepreneurs have become like these rock stars of society.
yeah,
But I really, as I've gotten older, judge less on the monetary success and more on, well, what did their family life look like? What did
yeah,
their personal relationships look like? Were they nice? I mean, everyone's human, so we all have our downfalls. But by and large, when you look at the aggregate, did people like being around them? Were they inspired to be around them, or were they pushed to extremes where like it was almost like a level of self harm? So
yeah,
there's definitely, yeah, and it's okay to be the small cog. It really
yeah,
is. If
yeah,
that's what
yeah,
brings you happiness and fulfillment, going home, being home with your family, being able to cut work completely off. Some
yeah,
people like going to bed and having nothing else to think about. So yeah,
yeah,
it's I think that's
yeah.
wise
Yeah,
advice.
I think, yeah, I think that's an important point to make, right? It's yeah, let's not idealize here or there, right? I mean, like my recommendation to everybody is focus on your journey, right? And I see it also in our hiring process. Sometimes people come on board, and the environment, the nimble environment, the uncertainties, the constant changing, the not fixed hours, it doesn't fit, right? And then they kind of feel bad, or they think, oh, something is wrong. Actually, nothing is wrong. It's just not a fit, right? It's like,
Hmm.
yeah, if you try the wrong size and it doesn't fit, it doesn't fit. There's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with the t-shirt, right? It
Hmm.
just doesn't fit, right?
Hmm.
So yeah, and I think that's sometimes important to remind people of.
Yeah, 100%. So my last question to you, because I'm sure you got some stuff that you got to going to. What do you want to be remembered for when you go on from this earth, when you die?
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, yeah, I have the ambition to have a bit of a legacy in triathlon. I hope I like there's I hope yeah, that we can have made triathlon into a more holistic sport, right? I think triathlon as a sport is still young, right? It's grown fantastically over 40 years, but I think for its maturity, it needs that better balance between short and long. And I hope I kind of contributed my little piece to the sport by saying, hey, we've given short course triathlon a shot, and by doing so, we've actually kind of, how to say, made the sport more sustainable, right? Made the
Mm,
sport here to stay because it is balanced, because it offers something for different peoples of interests, right?
hmm
So I hope, yeah, I hope I have contributed to the longevity of the sport that I'm very passionate about.
mm.
And
Well, I'd
there
say you have,
and with that actually have changed lives, right? That's
yeah.
obviously that's obviously what the consequence, because the sport will only the sport is there to change lives and to get people active, healthy, motivated.
Mm,
Yeah, give them
yeah.
something, give them an out or give them an in, whatever it is, right?
Mm, yeah.
Yeah,
I would agree. I think at the end of the day, yeah, it's really all about who you know and the lives that you're able to impact for sure. And
yeah,
it all comes back down to people. Less about money because money cannot do a thing without the people involved for sure.
yeah,
So, yeah.
yeah.
Well, Michael, I really appreciate you taking the time to sit down with me on this humble podcast to hear your story, and all the best to you. I would love to have you on again in the future, but it will be really neat to see how things shape up for, especially toward the next Olympic Games, and see how you guys are able to grow in North America. If there's ever a race nearby, I would love to go check it out and give it a shot.
Yeah, we'll get one nearby,
Yeah.
and otherwise you have to travel a little bit.
Yeah. Might have to come over to Europe at some point.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
All
Well,
right.
thank you so much, man. I really
Thank you.
appreciate
Great
it.
for having me. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much to Michael for coming on the podcast today and allowing me to, as I say every episode, dive into his life. Really do appreciate it because it is always cool to hear how people live their lives and do the things that they do. So Michael left us with, how does he want to be remembered? That he made an impact in the people's lives and in the sport of triathlon. So I wish all the best to him. And again, thank you so much, Michael, for being here. Make sure to check out the show notes for any links in the description, from newsletter to sponsor stuff with Zone 2, or what else is in there. If you are listening on YouTube, if you could like, comment, subscribe, really helps to continue to grow the channel and turn that notification bell on. If you are listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, you know what to do there. Comment, review, subscribe, anything you can do. Really appreciate you guys being here, and we will catch you in the next one. Peace.